Did you realize that there were just 4 numbers that changed the world? What are those numbers? 1, 0, 4, and 10,000. What do those numbers mean? Well, the 1 and 0, binary code. They're created really the digital foundation of the computing world, anything digital in our lives. The 4, it's 4 kilobytes of memory. Powered the Altair 8800 that actually became the foundation for Bill Gates' career in launching Microsoft. And 10,000? Well, that's 10,000 hours. That's the deliberative practice that transformed Bill's analytical thinking into a superpower. It's based on pretty much I don't know what you want to call it, urban belief that if you really want to be good at something, you have to put in 10,000 hours of practice. But these numbers reveal something deeper about Bill's mind. They expose a distinctive pattern of recognition system that's allowed him to see mathematical structure where others saw only chaos. This quantitative lens didn't just build Microsoft. It's now reshaping global health through the Gates Foundation's systematic, measurable approach to seemingly impossible challenges. During my executive time at HP, where I was CTO, I witnessed Bill's problem-solving approach up close and personal. What I observed wasn't another think positive or work harder success formula. It was a very specific cognitive framework that you can apply today to untangle your most challenging problems. We're about to decode his exact method for breaking impossible challenges into solvable components. You'll discover how he identifies the critical 20% of the factors that determine 80% of the outcomes. And perhaps most valuable, you'll learn his counterintuitive approach to multiplying impact through system redesign rather than brute force solutions. Now, this isn't about mimicking Bill's personality or copying Microsoft's business model. It's about adopting a proven mental operating system that transforms overwhelming complexity into clear, actionable steps. Whether you're launching a startup, managing a team, or solving persistent problems in your organization. Ready to install Gates' algorithm in your own thinking? Let's begin. Now, Bill Gates developed a distinctive cognitive approach that combines analytical precision with strategic vision. While often compared to contemporaries like Steve Jobs, Gates' thinking patterns reveal a fundamentally different approach. One that creates a unique mental advantage to solving really complex problems. First up, structural thinking. At his core, Gates is a structural thinker who excels at breaking down complex systems into their most component parts. Unlike more intuitive innovators, Gates approaches the problem by methodically dissecting the architecture, understanding the fundamental structure of the problem. He's famous for saying I believe in innovation, and that the way you get innovation is you fund research and you learn the basic facts. He digs deep. As Gates has stated, he's emphasizing that commitment to understanding the fundamental structures before attempting any kind of a solution. Now, this connects directly to systems thinking. But where many systems thinkers focus on relationships between the components, Gates excels at identifying leverage points, places where small changes produced outsized results. Now, consider Microsoft's early operating systems. Gates didn't try to create every application himself. Instead, he identified the underlying platform, the operating system, as the critical leverage point in the emerging PC ecosystem. By focusing Microsoft's efforts on controlling This fundamental layer, he created a structure that allowed thousands of third party developers to build applications. This strategic insight created a virtuous cycle that solidified Microsoft's dominance for decades to come. His second thinking model, first principle analysis. We've talked about first principle before. There's a full episode on it. We talked about it when I shared the episode on my meetings and how Elon Musk thinks. But in Gates' case, he consistently demonstrates a remarkable ability to strip away any form of conventional thinking and analyze situations from first principles. This approach allows him to see possibilities others miss entirely. He was talking and giving a speech, I think it was, where he said, talking about the financial and financial tech industry, and he challenged the whole financial industry to think about it really hard, saying, banking is necessary, banks are not. Listen to that carefully. Banking is necessary. Banks, the physical banks, the organizations that make up the banks, are not necessary. That is an amazing insight when you think about what does it mean to really understand first principles. You need the banking capabilities. You really don't need the banks. Now, this is this demonstration of being able to separate essential functions from their current implementations. This thinking pattern enabled Microsoft to leapfrog competitors repeatedly. When the internet adoption began accelerating in the mid-1990s, Gates wrote his famous, quote, Internet Tidal Wave memo. And I think you can actually find it online if you're interested. Bill Gates' memos are famous, many, many pages, but it's where he would describe and encourage the organization to think differently and to go after new areas, new problems that he was identifying. But in this case, in the Internet Tidal Wave memo, he was pointing out that while competitors saw the internet as just yet another application, he saw it and recognized it as a fundamental shift in computing's underlying structure. It was going to change everything. That memo reset Microsoft's entire strategy based on his first principles analysis, a pivot that ultimately saved the company from potential obsolescence. The third thinking model that Bill loves to apply is scenario planning. Gates employs a sophisticated scenario planning, mentally simulating multiple possible futures and their implications. This cognitive pattern allows him to prepare for all kinds of possible outcomes and position his organizations, both Microsoft when he was still there and now the Gates Foundation, advantageously regardless of which scenario unfolds. He's famous for pointing out that as humans, we tend to overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and far underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. Being conscious of that tendency forces him to think differently and look long and hard into what the possible range of futures and not get caught into this overestimation of the near term, underestimating the long term. And therefore, he loves to think about these long-term perspectives. It's where he spends most of the time in his mental headspace. Microsoft's early software licensing model demonstrates this approach. Rather than focusing solely on hardware like Apple did, or solely on software sales, Gates created a third model, licensing software to multiple hardware manufacturers. That proved better adapted to the emerging PC space. He didn't want to be locked in. He wanted to focus on that software space and therefore created a licensing model that resulted in Microsoft, what we have today. While competitors bet on everything on the single scenarios, Apple focusing on hardware, or Wang Computer, for those of us that are old enough to remember, Wang came out with their own PC. All the PC manufacturers came out with their own PC, and in some cases, proprietary operating systems. And they struggled. Gates positioned Microsoft to thrive across multiple possible futures, a strategic flexibility that would prove decisive as the industry evolved in what many would call unpredictable ways. The fourth thinking model that Bill applied was quantitative optimization. Gates exhibits exceptional quantitative thinking, consistently seeking, to measure and optimize and improve systems through data. This isn't mere number crunching, it's a fundamental cognitive orientation towards quantifiable improvement. Another one of his famous quotes was that he's been struck again and again by how important measurement is to improving the human condition. And this is, he notes specifically in his philanthropic work at the foundation, applying the same principles that guided his business leadership when he was at Microsoft. This thinking pattern manifested in Gates' famous attention to details and metrics-driven management style. At Microsoft, he instituted rigorous tracking of software bugs. Are they coming down? Are we generating more bugs than we're fixing? That type of thinking. And feature development. This created a quantitative framework to which had previously been managed by Microsoft and many in the early days in the PC software space by intuition. This approach enabled Microsoft to develop really increasingly complex software systems with predictable timelines. Now, in the case of these predictable timelines, I would have to say that the Office team at Microsoft has an unbelievable reputation of setting a date 3 years out and hitting that date. The operating system guys, not so much. The Office guys, very, very good. And this capability, and competitors struggled to match it, and that would transform the entire software industry's development practices. Everybody copied Bill. Now, what appears at first glance to be an obsession with numbers reveals itself as something far more profound. It's not just spreadsheets and tracking and metrics and KPIs. It's a fundamental belief that you can't improve what you don't measure. And as Gates would prove time and time again, measurement is just the beginning of the transformation. Now, let's think about how he thinks through problems. Bill developed a systematic methodology for problem solving that can be broken down into very specific steps. While most recognize his success, few understand the exact mental algorithm that's produced it. So let's decode Bill's approach step by step. Step one, define the problem space. Now, if you've been a long time viewer of the channel or listen to the podcast, you hear me talk about the importance of really understanding the problem. Bill is really the epitome of that thinking. He always begins by carefully defining the problem space, mapping the boundaries and dimensions with precision. He focuses on understanding not just the immediate challenge, but the entire ecosystem in which it exists. During Microsoft's early days, when personal computing was still just emerging, Gates didn't simply focus on creating individual software applications. Instead, he mapped the entire problem space of personal computing, the hardware, the operating system, the applications, the user needs. This comprehensive definition allowed Microsoft to position itself strategically at the operating system level, creating the foundation for decades of growth and for a financial model that anybody would love to have. What makes this step particularly powerful for Bill's ability to define the problems without being constrained by conventional boundaries. He doesn't accept industry standard problem definitions. Instead, he reframes challenges in ways that reveal new possibilities, seeing connections and opportunities others just totally miss. Step two, break down the complexity. Once the problem space is defined, Gates systematically decomposes complex challenges into smaller, more manageable components. This decomposition reveals the underlying structure of problems that might otherwise seem, impossible or insurmountable. When tackling global health challenges through the Gates Foundation, he applies this same approach. Rather than viewing, quote, just improving global health as a single monolithic challenge, he broke it down into specific disease burdens and delivery systems and research pipelines and economic factors and political. This decomposition enabled targeted interventions with measurable outcomes. You can't just fix the big problem. You need to understand and then understand where can you have the biggest impact. Now, again, as I've said before, the magic with Bill wasn't just about breaking the problem down, but it really was about understanding and really internalizing the critical relationships between the components. While others see just separate issues, Gate recognizes the hidden connections that create both constraints and opportunities. This holistic understanding allows him to address root causes rather than symptoms, creating solutions that stick rather than just temporary fixes that fail. Step three in the Gates algorithm, identify critical leverage points. Now, the Gates then analyzes the decomposed elements that we just talked about to identify the critical leverage points, places where targeted efforts can produce disproportionate results. This step requires both analytical skills and strategic vision. That famous internet tidal wave memo exemplified this approach. After breaking down the implications of the internet revolution, Gates identified specific leverage points where Microsoft needed to focus. That included web browsers, content standards, and server software. And by concentrating resources on these areas, Microsoft navigated the internet transition more successfully than many of the tech companies of that era. What separates Gates' approach from conventional strategy is his uncanny ability to find leverage points others overlook. That hidden fulcrum where a small amount of force creates massive movement. While competitors often spread resources evenly across all aspects of a problem, Gates concentrates efforts where it will multiply and have the biggest impact. This selective focus creates strategic advantages that can seem almost magical to outside observers. Step four in the Bill Gates algorithm, build systematic solutions. Rather than creating one-off fixes, Gates develops systematic solutions designed to address underlying causes. Now, this systemization creates scalable, sustainable approaches to complex problems. Microsoft's development of Visual Basic demonstrates this. Instead of simply creating more programming tools for the geeks, Gates recognized that software development itself was a critical bottleneck in computing adoption. Visual Basic, making it really simple for anybody and everybody to write programs. Systemized application development. It really did make it accessible to a much wider audience and therefore dramatically expanded the software ecosystem around Windows. The key insight here isn't just solving problems, but designing systems that continue solving similar problems automatically. Gates' solution typically creates virtuous cycles, self-reinforcing systems where initial successes feed back into the system to create even greater success over time. This systems thinking approach explains why Gates' impact tend to grow exponentially rather than linearly, With back to the Visual Basic example, one was the formation of Microsoft Press, publishing books to teach people how to program and how to use the tools and how to start their businesses. This also led to supporting universities, where universities would then teach students on how to program and how to get started in the early days of the PC space. Those students then would become successful. Some of them would actually become professors and continue it. And you saw this flywheel effect over time. It wasn't about just the immediate return. This systems thinking grew exponentially rather than linearly. And Bill understood that, and he understands it pretty much better than anybody I've ever had a real personal relationship. I should say, maybe Elon would be the other example. Step 5, iterate with data. Gates continuously refines solutions based on quantitative feedback. This iterative approach allows for rapid improvement and adoption as conditions change. Microsoft's software development methodology under Gates exemplified this approach with its rigorous tracking of bugs and features and performance metrics. By creating tight feedback loops between code changes and measured outcomes, Microsoft could systematically improve its products over time. What distinguishes Gates' iteration from simple trial and error is his structured approach to learning from data. Kind of sounds like Thomas Edison, who we've covered in a previous episode. He identifies specific metrics that truly matter, measures them relentlessly, and uses the resulting insights to drive targeted improvements. That is Bill Gates in a nutshell. This disciplined approach to iteration explains how Microsoft's products that begin with significant limitations eventually dominate their categories through systematic, data-driven evolution. Now, step 6. And step 6 is one that Bill has pretty much mastered, and that is scale with precision. This final step in Gates' algorithm is scaling successful solutions with careful attention to maintaining quality and effectiveness. That's hard to do. This disciplined approach to growth has defined both his business and his philanthropic endeavors. Microsoft's global expansion strategy demonstrates this principle to the T. Rather than pursuing growth for its own sake, Gates focused on creating localized versions of Microsoft products that maintain core functionality while adapting to local markets. This precision scaling helped Microsoft become truly global while maintaining product consistency. While many leaders view scaling as simply doing more, doing it bigger, doing it faster, go everywhere, Gates recognizes that effective scaling requires redesigning solutions for different contexts and different volumes. His approach to scaling focuses on maintaining the core elements that drive success while adapting peripheral aspects to new environments. A nuanced approach that has allowed his impact to expand globally without quality degradation that typically accompanies rapid growth. What appears on the surface as simple problem-solving method reveals itself as something much more profound. This is a comprehensive system for transforming impossible challenges into achievable outcomes. But how can we apply these insights to today's most pressing problems? You're not starting Microsoft, most likely. You might be. You might be doing a nonprofit. You may be in a totally different industry, whether that's manufacturing or, large scale consumer packaged goods, whatever you're doing. But how can you apply these insights? Let's talk through this. So, Gates' thinking methods have powerful across all kinds of domains. Far from being an academic theory, these approaches are being used right now by forward thinking organizations to solve their most challenging problems. So let's take a look at some real world applications, and therefore, then how can you implement them in your own work? So let's talk about first up Amazon and how Amazon uses Gates's approach to strategic planning in uncertain markets. Modern business leaders face unprecedented market uncertainty, the rapid change, the introduction of new capabilities. Today's world, we're all talking about AI. That's all from, it could be technological disruption to geopolitical instability. Gates's systematic thinking approach provides a valuable framework for navigating these challenges. Amazon really exemplifies the application of Gates-style structured thinking to strategic planning. Much like Gates did with Microsoft, Amazon breaks down complex market dynamics into their component parts, identifies the leverage points like fulfillment infrastructure or cloud computing, and builds systematic solutions that create sustainable competitive advantages. Now, you can apply this approach by one, mapping your entire business ecosystem, including your suppliers, your competitors, your complementary services, breaking this ecosystem down into its distinct components and relationships, identifying those 2 or 3 leverage points within the system that could provide disproportionate advantages, and then developing systematic approaches to strengthening your position at these leverage points. And then don't stop there, creating quantitative metrics to track progress and enable continuous improvement, because the odds are you're not going to get it right out of the gate. What makes this approach particularly powerful isn't just the analysis, but how it transforms strategic planning from an annual guesswork, oh, we got to do the budget, let's figure this out, into an ongoing system of evolution and adaptation. You're doing adaptations, you're evolving, you're improving, and therefore it just becomes part of the culture. And then by identifying those critical leverage points in your business ecosystem, you can focus limited resources. And I don't think I've run into very few people who have unlimited resources. We all have limited resources. Where do you place them? Where do you focus them? You can focus your limited resources where they'll create maximum impact, a capability that becomes increasingly valuable as market uncertainty grows. Let's take another look at another example. We're going to take a look at Google and Google's ability to do technology implementation. As organizations increasingly implement complex technologies like AI, IoT, Internet of Things, blockchain, Gates' problem decomposition approach offers a valuable implementation framework. Google's approach to AI implementation demonstrates this in action. Rather than pursuing a monolithic AI strategy, they broke down the applications into specific use cases, identify the critical technical components for each, and then develop systematic implementation approaches that can be measured and refined over time. Allows them to move much, much faster. To apply this methodology to your technology initiatives, step 1, break down your technology implementation into discrete, manageable components. Next, identify dependencies between the components and create a logical sequence for implementation. This is where most people get it wrong. They just want to get it in and get it fast. Think about the sequence. Next, develop specific success metrics for each component. And then create feedback mechanisms to capture quantitative and qualitative data during implementation. And then last, use this data to continuously refine your approach. Now, the true power of this approach lies in its ability to transform overwhelming technological change into manageable steps. Not everything is of equal importance. While many organizations become paralyzed by technological complexity or transformations that take decades, those applying Gates's algorithm can implement transformative technological implementation, creating unique and very advanced competitive advantages through successful adoption, while others remain stuck in the analysis paralysis phase. Next up, we're going to take a look at a philanthropic approach. Many of you know I have a couple of charities that I'm very passionate about. A couple of them, one I run, which is Hacking Autism. So let's talk about how would you apply this to a charity? Maybe you're on a charity board. Maybe you run a charity. Let's think about this. So we're going to talk about social innovation and impact about a specific charity called Give Directly. Now, Gates's thinking methods have perhaps their most powerful application in addressing complex social challenges, from education to public health. The success of organizations like Give Directly show how Gates's style of first principles thinking can transform social innovation. By questioning the fundamental assumption of traditional aid models and focusing on direct cash transfers, they've created a more efficient and empowering approach to poverty reduction. Rather than giving it to an overall organization, which then takes a portion of that money to keep at their headquarters for their administrative staff, Give Directly is putting money directly into people's hands. To apply Gates's methodology to social innovation initiatives, here are some ways to think about that. Define the social problem space comprehensively, including historical approaches and their limitations. Break down the challenge into its component causes and effects. Identify which components offer the greatest leverage for improvement. In this case, their target was reduce poverty. How do you do that? Well, one way to do that is you want to get as much money into their hands as possible. So the next step would be then to develop systematic, measurable interventions focused on these leverage points. How do you put more money directly into their hands? And then create rigorous feedback systems to track the impact, enable continuous improvement. In this case of Give Directly, they had to go against a lot of assumptions of money was going to be misused, or that people would not work as hard, or they would just sit and wait for the money to arrive every month. They had disproved that and addressed those concerns. Now, once you've done that, then you've got to scale. Scale successfully approaches with careful attention to maintaining effectiveness. You just can't flood money. You have to think about how do you scale this. What separates this approach from traditional social innovation is its relentless focus on measurable outcomes rather than feel-good intentions. And by applying Gates's quantitative orientation to social challenges, organizations can move beyond feel-good to create interventions that demonstrably improve lives, a transformation that urgently is needed in a world with limited resources and ever-growing social needs. And then personal productivity and learning. In this case, we're going to take a look at Bill Gates's Think Weeks. Now, on an individual level, Bill's methodical approach to information processing and problem solving offers powerful tools for personal productivity and continuous learning. He is famous for his Think Weeks, periods of isolated reading. He would literally carry these big bags. He read physical books. I'm pretty sure he still does, albeit it's been a while since I've run into Bill. But in his Think Weeks, he would go away literally offline, no computer, no phone, for isolated reading and reflection, where he processed large amounts of information and identifies strategic implications. Used to be at Microsoft, now it's the foundation. This structured approach to learning exemplifies his systematic thinking applied to personal development. You can apply Gates's methodology to your own productivity and learnings by one, creating structured systems for capturing and organizing information. You read something, you think it's a good idea, where do you put it? Put it into a notebook that you carry with you? Do you put it onto your notes app on your phone. But you have to, putting it in there is great. Now, next, develop a regular review process to identify patterns and implications. Think deeply about this. Break down complex personal or professional goals into manageable components. Identify the highest leverage activities within your work and focus your energy there. You can measure progress quantitatively and refine your approach. So, if you've set a personal goal, you've read some information, you've got a really great idea, are you making progress? How do you measure progress? Is it how much time did you spend on it? Count your hours. Did you contact 5 people to get feedback? Whatever it is, measure progress quantitatively and then refine your approach based on the data. Now, this transformation approach isn't just about better organization, but fundamentally changing how you process information and make decisions. By applying Gates's systematic thinking to your personal and professional development, you can transform overwhelming information flows into actionable insights, a critical advantage in today's knowledge economy. Now, these practical applications that we talked about demonstrate the versatility and power of Gates's thinking methods across diverse contexts. Yet, implementing these approaches is not without its challenges. So let's examine potential pitfalls and their solution. Now, while Bill's thinking methods, they're incredibly powerful, they do come with potential pitfalls that need to be addressed for successful implementation. Even Bill himself occasionally fell victim to these challenges that we're going to walk through now. So understanding them now will help you avoid the same traps that Bill falls into. First up, analysis paralysis. Gates's deep analytical approach can sometimes lead to overthinking and delayed action. Microsoft's initial slow response to search engines and social media demonstrates this risk. So, what's the solution? Well, balance analysis with action by setting clear decision timelines. So, create structured approach where you allocate specific time for analysis, but commit to move forward once that time expires. Time box it. Another is adopt the 70% confidence rule. If you have 70% of the information needed and you are 70% confident in the plan, make the decision rather than waiting for perfect certainty. Move forward. Use the 70% of the data with 70% confidence, pull the trigger, move forward, and then validate and adjust if new information comes in, but don't wait for perfect certainty. The key insight here isn't eliminating analysis, but recognizing when additional analysis just is no longer is going to yield proportional value relative to the time you're wasting waiting. By establishing clear thresholds for decision making, you get to maintain analytic rigor while preventing the paralysis that often accompanies perfectionism. This balanced approach enables both thoughtful consideration and decisive action, a combination that creates sustainable competitive advantage. Next up, overlooking emotional factors. If you've ever spent any time with Bill, you know why I put this on my list. Gates's highly rational thinking style can sometimes, or you could say most times, undervalue emotional cultural factors that influence how solutions are adopted and implemented. Microsoft's challenges with consumer products like, the Zune music player. Steve Ballmer sent me a Zune player when it was first being developed, and it was their very late attempt to try to compete with the iPod. I probably still have a Zune player around here somewhere, but it was basically good tech, but Microsoft Bill did not really get a grasp of the emotional role music really plays in people's lives. So, what's the solution to deal with this emotional disconnect? Complement quantitative analysis with qualitative insights. You can't be just looking at the numbers. You can't drive your business by spreadsheet. You have to have this qualitative insight. Incorporate user experience research, emotional impact assessments, and cultural context into your problem solving framework. Create diverse teams that balance analytical and emotional intelligence to ensure both are considered. And what do I mean by diverse teams? People with different cultural backgrounds, different, where did they grow up? Did everybody on your team grow up in the US, or do you have people that come from international background? Do you have some military brats? I find military brats are great on innovation teams. Why? Because they moved around every 2 years. They had to fit into the local culture quickly. They figured out a way to get themselves plugged in fast and understand how a particularly military base or a new country they're moving to, how it operates so that they can be successful. Key when thinking about products, innovation, and adoption. The deeper lesson here isn't just including emotional factors such as an afterthought, but recognizing them as fundamental components of successful solutions. Human behavior is driven by both rational and emotional factors, something Gates himself has increasingly recognized in his philanthropic work and in where his weak spot is. But so by integrating emotional intelligence with analytical rigor, you can create solutions that address not just what people should do, but what will motivate them to actually do it. The next risk in the Bill Gates algorithm: excessive complexity. Gates's comfort with complexity can sometimes lead to overly complicated solutions. Early versions of Windows were criticized for their complexity compared to more intuitive solutions. So, what should you do? Add simplification. Add it as a literally specific step. So, after you've developed the solution, challenge yourself to reduce its complexity by at least 30% while maintaining core functionality. Test solutions with users who have varying levels of expertise to ensure accessibility. One of the reasons why at HP I put in place the Michelle test. Michelle test is for my wife. My wife is at the opposite end of the tech curve and therefore had very low patience of dealing with any form of complexity. Every consumer product had to go through my wife using it to see if she could figure it out. If she could not figure it out, the product should not ship. Now, this insight here isn't just about making things simpler for simplicity's sake, but recognizing that elegance often comes from reduction rather than addition. The most powerful solutions typically embody what Einstein called everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. By making simplification an explicit part of your process, you can create solutions that maintain their power while becoming accessible and adoptable. The other weakness to the Gates algorithm: strategic hyperfocus. Gates' ability to focus intensely on strategic priorities sometimes led to Microsoft to miss adjacent opportunities, things that were maybe just outside of his blinders. The company's late entry into search and mobile phones and social media demonstrates this risk. So, what do? You need to implement a structured horizon scanning. You need to be heads up, not always heads down. So, you need to allocate some people. You need to have some people on your team who you trust, who would not be willing to yell, "Stop, we need to go work over here." So, you need to allocate specific resources to explore adjacent possibilities beyond your current focus. Let them roam. You need to create very separate teams with explicit mandate to challenge the organization's strategic assumptions and identify overlooked opportunities. The key lesson isn't, abandoning strategic focus and just running around rampant, but complementing it with systematic exploration of adjacent possibilities. The most successful organizations maintain their focus on core priorities while simultaneously scanning for emerging opportunities. A balanced approach that enables both execution excellence and strategic adaptation. This dual capability becomes increasingly valuable as technological market changes accelerate. Now, we've gone through all these pitfalls and the solutions. They're here really to highlight an important truth. Even the most powerful thinking methods have limitations. The ultimate skill isn't rigidly applying any single approach, but knowing when and how to adapt your thinking to different contexts. With that in mind, let's put Gates's thinking methods into practice. So, we're going to talk through some structured exercises designed to help you apply the systematic approach to a challenge you're currently facing. So, what is this methodology? What are these exercises? Well, step one, select a complex problem. Choose a significant challenge in your work or life that just feels overwhelming or it's really resistant to any form of simple solution. Step two, map the problem space. Draw a comprehensive map of the problem's components, boundaries, and relationships. Include all the factors, all the stakeholders, and systems that influence or are influenced by this challenge. Step three, systematic breakdown. Divide this map into 5 to 7 discrete components that can be addressed individually. For each of these components, then you need to identify the key variables that influence the outcome, current limitations and bottlenecks, and potential metrics for measuring improvement. You got that? Now we're on to step 4. Identify the leverage points. Analyze your breakdown to find the 1 or 2 components where focused effort would produce disproportionate results. What are the critical leverage points in this system? And then step 5, design a systematic approach. For those identified leverage points, the 1 or 2, develop a systematic solution that addresses the underlying cause rather than the system or symptoms. Include very specific metrics to track your progress. And then 6, create an implementation timeline. Develop a structured timeline for implementing your solution with clear milestones and decision points. I'm interested in hearing, what problem did you go after? Share your results in the comments, and so that I and the rest of the people that are in our community would see how you're applying the Gates algorithm. What was your problem? How did you break it down? What are the leverage points? And what are you seeing as impact? And maybe you've already done something like this in the past. Share your past experience. What makes this exercise particularly powerful isn't just the process, but how it transforms your relationship with complexity, with complex problems. Rather than feeling overwhelmed, you'll develop the ability to see structure where others really see chaos. It's the same cognitive skill that gives Bill his distinct advantage. Remember, his approach works because it transforms seemingly insurmountable problems into structured components that can be systematically addressed. The key is breaking down complexity without losing sight of the whole system. The balance between analytical decomposition and holistic understanding creates the cognitive advantage that defined Bill's career and that you can now apply to your own challenges. Or perhaps the most valuable insight from Gates's thinking isn't any specific technique, but a fundamental orientation towards problems as opportunities for systematic improvement. Where others see obstacles, Gates sees systems waiting to be optimized, a perspective that transforms challenges from sources of frustration into platforms for innovation. So, what's next? As we conclude our exploration of Bill Gates's thinking methodology, his algorithm, we're completing a fascinating journey through the cognitive approaches of 4 transformative innovators. We've already covered Nikola Tesla with his extraordinary visualization abilities, and Thomas Edison with his relentless experimentation. Last week, we did Steve Jobs with his aesthetic integration. And now we've done Bill Gates with his structural decomposition of complex systems. If you haven't seen those, go down, click in the show notes or in the comment or in the description below. We'll have the links to those. But what's becoming clear through this series is that truly exceptional innovators don't rely on single thinking styles. They develop cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt their approach based on the specific challenge at hand. Sometimes a problem requires Tesla's visionary imagination. Other times it's Edison's persistent trial and error, or Jobs' intuitive design sensibilities, or Gates's analytic precision. The ability to recognize which thinking pattern to apply in different situations may be the meta skill that separates good problem solvers from truly transformative ones. So, as you develop your own cognitive toolkit, practice shifting between these different modes of thinking depending on the nature of the problems that you are addressing. This insight points towards an exciting frontier in our understanding of exceptional thinking, not just for mastering individual cognitive approaches, but developing this metacognitive ability to select combined approaches based on context. This flexibility may represent the next evolution in our exploration of revolutionary thinking patterns that differentiate you from everybody else. Now, I'd like to hear from you. Who should we explore next in our How to Think Like series? Should we analyze the integrative thinking of Leonardo da Vinci, or the first principles reasoning of Elon Musk, or someone else entirely? Share your suggestions in the comments. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell to ensure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes in this. Your support makes these deep dives into revolutionary thinking possible. Your support could be monetary, it could be just a thumbs up, it could be a comment, kind word, encouragement. Now, if you find value in these explorations, consider supporting the channel over on Patreon, where if you become a member, you get access to exclusive content, early releases, and member-only discussions. And no, none of the money that gets funded into the Patreon comes to me personally. It funds the team, the tools, the research that we do to prepare it. None of it comes to me. But you can find the links to our Patreon in the description. So until next time, keep thinking differently, because the way you think determines what you can achieve. See you next week. Bye-bye.